Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. If everybody can grab their seats. We do have quorum, and I'd like to resume the second meeting of the Budget Committee. Now today, I'm just going to do a rundown of what to expect in the next couple of days. This is the second and final day of budget deliberations. We're going to be hearing from the remainder of the boards and agencies. Tomorrow, we're going to be getting into the public deputations. So I just want to let everyone know that at City Hall, there's going to be two subcommittees. The one subcommittee with 3 councillors will be hearing deputations at City Hall here from 9:30 to 5 p.m. and then 6 p.m. onwards, depending on how many deputations there will be. There'll also be public deputations at the Scarborough Civic Centre from 3 to 5 p.m. and then from 6 p.m. onwards. Next week, or on Monday, February 11th, the subcommittees will be going to North York and the Etobicoke Civic Centres, again, a 3 to 5 p.m. time and a 6 p.m. onwards. If you wish to present to the budget committees, please register in advance to the City Clerk by emailing buc@toronto.ca and indicating your preferred location and session. So today we're going to be, there's a number of presentations from the accountability officers this morning, and there'll be a presentation from the TTC this afternoon. I just want to let everybody know even though with the 4 accountability officers, unfortunately the Integrity Commissioner was unable to be here today, but all the notes have been provided to us if we want to review, and if there's again any questions, she'll make herself available after today. And again, we have all the notes over at the side of the room if you want to have a look at them, or of course you can look at them online. Just want to give a reminder, excuse me, to all my colleagues, if there's any briefing note requests, to get them into the clerk as soon as possible with your permission for me or for us to review them, just to make sure that they're all in order. We have in the past had, and I don't think it's going to be the case this time, where we've had so many briefing note requests come in. It has been a challenge for staff to actually be able to get them out in a timely manner. In fact, some of the briefing notes that we've seen in the past are actually more reports as opposed to briefing notes. So it gives us an opportunity to at least review them to make sure that, if anything, staff have the appropriate time to be able to do that. So the intent is to ensure that any briefing note request comes in is honored and is moved, but if you could just get them in by lunch, it would be good, because we'll be moving them after the TTC report. Any questions before we begin at all? Councillor Layton?
So I had some confusion. So we are going to do the TTC at the end of today's session? Yeah,
so it'll be actually, as I understand, in the afternoon. The CEO wasn't available till after lunch. So depending on how things go this morning, we may just recess a bit early. But we were, again, because they couldn't actually make it till after lunch. So that's how we worked out the schedule. So we'll just play it by ear, and we'll see how the morning goes. Why don't we begin with, so we have the rundown of what's going to be happening. The first group will be, I guess, titled Other Agencies. There's no presentations, but there will be questions. So what I will do, I will just run down the name of each of the agencies. And I know we have the representatives there. So if there's any questions before the CEOs who are the representatives get up, we'll assess whether there's some questions. And if there's no questions, then we'll just move on to the next. So we don't have a lot of people getting up with no questions. So we'll begin with the Association of Community Centres. Are there any questions on that? We do? Okay, Councillor Bradford has some questions. So the representatives from the Association of Community Centres, if you could, who will be answering? Oh, okay, perfect.
Perhaps just in this moment, maybe we should go through that first list of agencies in their entirety and have, if there are no questions of them, have them just dismiss them. Have them go back to work. Does that make sense? Because I don't have many, particularly in the first couple. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. So why don't we do that? So we're just going to go through to see if any of the questions on any of the agencies or divisions or actually agencies are there. So we have a community center of Association of Community Centers. We're going to have questions. Any questions on Exhibition Place? Okay, we have Exhibition Place. Heritage Toronto. No, okay. Again, and Councillor Layton, I realize that Councillor Carroll is not here. So I know she's coming, so I'm realizing because she may have questions, and right. I just want to honor that. So I don't want to have an agency go.
You're probably right. You're probably right.
Anyway. So anyway, let's just go down just so we get a sense so at least they know that questions may be coming. Questions on civic theaters? TO Live now? I don't see any. Toronto Zoo, there's questions. Arena Boards of Management? At this point, I don't see any questions. Young Dundas Square? No. Create TO? Yes, there's questions with that. Toronto Parking Authority? Questions. TRCA? Questions. And the Toronto Atmospheric Fund. Okay, and then we have all the other corporate services. Well, let's just start with that for now. So, Association of Community Centres. Councillor Bradford, you had questions.
Thanks very much. Through the chair. Oh, thanks. What's the general breakdown of cost sharing with respect to partnerships for community centers? Are they typically out fundraising or seeking donations from outside partners? Is that common?
Through the chair, on page 19 of the analyst notes, there's a chart that provides the ratio of core to program funding. So the basic deal for the AOCs is the city covers their core. They have to go out and fundraise all of the program funding. This chart gives you the comparison between the 10 centers on how much they fundraise.
Are there supports from the city side in place to assist with fundraising, or does each community center take a different approach to that?
Each community center takes a different approach depending on their local community needs and assets. So it's really, each center is very different, both in its the physical design of the center and the local community needs.
Have we seen an increase in the non-core funding levels? Is that something that is increasing or decreasing, or does it stay the same?
Overall, there has probably been a slight increase. Some centers are extremely adept at raising funds. The 519 Church Street would be a good example of that. Other smaller centers without some of the local assets have more of a challenge. We have been working with them and encouraging them over the last few years to put a bit more attention to their non-core funding.
And last question, is there, do the community centers get together and share best practices around fundraising? Do we have support mechanisms in place? Is there, are there lessons that, you know, like the 519, for example, could share with other community centers?
There is a regular meeting of the 10 executive directors. I believe it's monthly or close to. And many common issues are discussed at that table. I also know that individual centers will connect with other centers for their advice on specific management issues.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. So I don't believe there's any questions for Exhibition Place in Heritage. Oh, sorry. Councillor Perks has questions on Exhibition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Looking at the analyst notes, page 31 and 2, capital unmet needs not included in the 2019 to 2028 staff recommended budget. So the big thing that I see here is that Exhibition Place believes it needed to do some work in that 10-year period with a total value of about $12 million for electrical underground high voltage utilities. So could you tell me a little bit about what that is?
It's all a hydro infrastructure that's below ground. The infrastructure below ground are owned by Exhibition Place. We had worked with Hydro for the last couple of years because they were going to take it over because they wanted the capacity to service not only Exhibition Place but the Parkdale community. They have decided not to go down that route, and the infrastructure needs to be fixed. Otherwise, it's deteriorating, it's starting to fail, and it's starting to affect shows. And with the opening of the hotel and the BMO field and everything there and all the tenants, it's important that the infrastructure be fixed over the next 10 years.
So because that infrastructure is, and here I'm reading, 50 years old, has reached the end of their life, and failure to proceed could result in electrical system failure causing substantial financial losses to Exhibition Place and its commercial tenants on the ground.
Yes.
So we're not paying for that in this budget. We're just leaving that out there hanging. Is that, it says unmet needs.
2019 has a good start.
Yeah, in 19, 20, and 21, the city has provided over $3 million to meet that needs. And what they're saying is in future years, in 2021, they will look at it and provide 1 year at a time. So you'll have a 3-year rolling forecast of funding.
Okay, but I'm, so maybe Ms. Levita can help me. I'm reading verbatim. These projects will be included in the list of unfunded capital priorities considered for future funding in the budget.
So through you, Mr. Chair.
Right. Oh.
That's true. So as our friends at Exhibition Place have identified, we have in fact been able to accommodate funding for the first couple of years so they could get started with the most critical repairs. And then as we come to the next year's budget, we'll see what we can add going forward. So they'll be doing this in phases.
In the 10-year plan, we've allocated how much?
We have allocated $4.2 million in 19, 20, and 21.
And the need is 12 million.
Right.
So there's an 8 million shortfall in dealing with the backlog of electrical repairs that are needed to keep the fairgrounds operating.
That's correct.
That's correct? Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Next is Civic Theatres Toronto, or actually TO Live now. Any questions on TO Live? Okay, I think we'll move on to Toronto Zoo. I thought I saw questions for Toronto Zoo. I could stand corrected. Okay, no question. Oh, Councillor. Okay, sorry. Okay, Councillor McKelvey, then Councillor Perks. We'll give them a second to come up.
Thank you for coming in from Scarborough. My question was about, you have a proposal for a new dynamic pricing model, and when do you think that would come in place, and how nimble is your governance structure to change pricing quickly?
We're evaluating the dynamic pricing proposals now, and we hope to have a decision made in the next few weeks, and we have evaluated all our systems to be able to accommodate the quick change. So it could be usually about 8 weeks to implement the dynamic pricing once you've selected the appropriate service provider.
And what was your shortfall last year because of revenues for admissions?
Our revenues for admissions were short in the order of, to the point, about $3.5 million.
And is your slow, when is your slow, well, your slow time is fall?
Right now, we're living it right now. And the early spring, so January to March, and November, December, usually the slower times, October, November, December after Thanksgiving.
And with all the investments that you have proposed, like which ones will strategically target those slow times?
Specifically, the one that will have the, that's gearing up to have an impact is, first of all, the winter Zoomobile. If we have a winter vehicle that gets individuals, the zoo is a very big site. So easy to walk around in the summertime, but tough to walk around in the wintertime. But we do have core buildings that we are planning to have a shortened Zoomobile route that would take visitors from the main entrance to close to, say, our in the Malaya Pavilion, which is the first stop along the route from the main stop. And then they could reboard the Zoomobile and go on to the African rainforest and America's Pavilion and Australasia Pavilion. So it would take them from building to building where the greatest opportunity to view animals and exhibits is during this time of year.
And so with those investments that are really kind of more expansion related, how are you balancing that with state of good repair and addressing that backlog at the zoo?
Well, it's a delicate balance, but we are balancing it. It's, in terms of our state of good repair, the largest element of our state of good repair that's sitting in state of good repair now is for our orang outdoor exhibit. So that makes up about half of what the state of good repair amount is for 2019. And it's a carry forward from 2018 as well. So that project is in design right now and for opening halfway through our spring of 2020. So, and on the state of good repair side, we've had issues with state of good repair. Just recently, we had our main pavilions in the Malaya and African rainforest are the high peak glass, circa 1974. They've been buildings there since 1974. It's very difficult. They're architecturally significant. So we're looking at, we just had some glass panes break in the past week, which getting glass is one thing, but getting companies that will actually get up there to repair them.
On top of animals?
Sorry?
In an animal's pen, right?
And, well, we actually have to secure, so first priority is to secure the public safety from inside. So we had to close sections, but which is now fully reopened, and get someone in to fix the glass right away. However, the larger issue is the fact that those are basically single pane glass, and over time we will have to, through state of good repair, get those peaks and glass of those two pavilions replaced.
So given that admissions are seasonal and weather dependent, you could have really good years and some not so good years. What are you doing about looking at sustainability going forward in your funding model beyond just the money coming from the city?
Well, we're always looking at a large menu of seasonal events. We're actually looking at broadening and getting more seasonal events that will come early in the year and also finish off the year with events that will get individuals out there in the off season or the lower season. We generally don't have a lot of trouble attracting people during the summer months. However, we are still significantly impacted by weather, whether that's extreme cold. A lot of extreme cold in the beginning of 2018, which impacted 2018, and also heat and rain during the summer, and a lot of cold so far this year. But to get people out, as I said, the winter Zoomobile, and also we're entertaining the possibility of a major event that would go from the October timeframe through the end of March, which would get people out to enjoy something at the zoo site.
What about your foundation? Like, is the foundation also going to create some stability?
Yes, definitely.
And that's new, right?
The new Toronto Zoo Wildlife Conservancy. We're in the process of recruiting an executive director now, and that'll be posted later this week. And we've been working with a recruitment firm, KCI, in that recruitment. And we're hoping that a new executive director with the ability to bring on some new staff, new complement, separate legal entity from the Toronto Zoo. So it's not part of we have influence over their budget, but it's not part of the City of Toronto. It's a separate legal entity, much the same as the old Toronto Zoo Foundation. But they'll have the ability to hire their own staff and also probably assume some of the staff that are in the development role of development officers now.
Thank you.
And that's.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Councillor Perks, I believe you had some.
So I'm looking at the analyst notes, page 30. And this is the unmet capital needs not included in the recommended 10-year capital plan. There are three large ones there. The first one is building services improvements. So this says that you require $12.5 million to address service and maintenance needs. Can you give me a sense of what those are?
Well, exactly what I've just been describing now to the councillor is that our existing buildings, such as pavilions that have been in existence since 1974, with hard to get at spots to maintain, those are the ones that we're going to have to focus on and make up a big part of that $12 million over the next 10 years. Specifically, the building and services unmet needs, that was identified in our recent building audit. We had a site audit, we had a building audit, and now we're in the process of a site audit this year, which is going to identify all the priorities from a SOGR standpoint over the next 10 years.
And in the capital plan that the city, in the debt limits the city has established for you, you're unable to accommodate that 12 million.
That's right. Our debt limit right now is, our debt funding is $6 million, generally $6 million in new debt each year. And it's, so we have prioritized accordingly. So the items that are most imminent and the highest needs are within our current debt target. And the items that we can't fit in there, we've identified, and they're unmet needs. But
these are based on actual building audits that you did?
Yes, this is based on actual building audits.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nunziata.
Yeah, just a question on sponsorship. So there's been a huge difference from 2017, big drop in sponsorships. And so can you tell me what you're doing to increase that sponsorship? And is the foundation, are you working within the foundation to increase that sponsorship?
Well, we're not, yes, so big drop between 2017 and 2018. We had a significant amount of sponsorship assistance with the 5-year Panda exhibit. So that, naturally, we anticipated a decrease in 2018, not to the extent that it decreased, but we are hoping through, we're not quite decided yet on whether or not we look at sponsorships as more a business development side of the fence as opposed to an actual fundraising donation side. That's more the business. So it's likely that sponsorships will remain within the zoo's portfolio, the Toronto Zoo, as opposed to moving over to the new Conservancy. But we are actively, we have a business development officer position. It's currently vacant. The individual left early in the year, and we are actually looking to reorganize how we're going to be looking at sponsorships. The sponsorship side for the zoo has changed over the past 5 years. And actually the last 10 years, we used to be able to attract, when we opened up our kids zoo and the area, organizations were sponsoring to the extent of, say, in the order of $250,000 to $500,000 on occasion. But now that's the maximum sponsorship you would look at is probably about $100,000 and even lower. So we're looking at increasing the volume of smaller sponsorships to make up for larger and broadening our base of sponsorships so you have more to draw on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
So just following on that line of questioning, the time period you just described is a time period during which there's a big conversation about selling the zoo, and now we're keeping it open, but we're deferring its capital. Is there a direct correlation in the stability of the organization and its state of good repair to the attractiveness to sponsor it for larger sponsorships?
Well, I think first and foremost, Councillor, is that that's a very good question, because it's a very competitive environment now for sponsorships. I mean, we're up against the hospital sector, we're up against the special needs sector in terms of cancer research, et cetera. So it's very competitive. But our brand is very, if you look at how strong the brand is very strong for the Toronto Zoo. There's a lot of people that specifically support the brand, and so we feel very positive about with making improvements gradually through the capital program, the support that we get from the city, and also our operating initiatives through widening our breadth of special exhibits all year round, and bringing in a vehicle that will bring people around the zoo, we feel very positive about sustainability of the zoo. I'm not going to say it's never been better, but it's heading in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, thank you very much. Thank you. Arena Boards of Management. Other questions? Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much. This, I think, is maybe to financial planning. The budget, and I'm just specifically looking at the piece about the Ted Reeve Arena. The vinyl bubble structure there is coming towards end of life, and it was noted in the notes that the vinyl is contingent on capital funding being available within the Parks, Forestry, and Recreation capital budget and plan. I was just wondering, do we have this accounted for specifically in the PF&R budget for 2019 or future years? That was a very specific question.
Our understanding, through Mr. Chair, our understanding is that it is included, but we'll confirm it for you.
Okay, thanks very much. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to Young Dundas Square. Seeing none for Young Dundas Square. I know we have questions for Create TO. Councillor Perks, I believe.
This is just sort of a general question about Create TO and how we're handling public assets. So, I don't see this discussed anywhere here, but it does mention the Housing Now. Now, when Create TO was established, my understanding was council had said and been told by city staff that the purpose was not to dispose of city assets in order to generate revenue. Am I correct?
Through the, excuse me, through the chair, what we said, Councillor Perks, was it was to unlock land value and create city buildings. So it was not to dispose, it was actually to create, actually create city building. That was really the intent.
So the mandate has always been, don't just sell land to generate cash, use the land for city building purposes.
Correct. That definitely is the purpose of Create TO.
And I wanted to make sure of that because I read in a recent staff report that if we didn't use some of our surplus land for Housing Now, that it would have simply been sold off for condos. And I wanted to get it clear. Your mandate was never to sell any of our land for condos. It was always to use our land for city building purposes.
So through the chair, I'm just going to play back a little bit of a few years. What we had done actually, the old Bill Toronto days, Councillor Perks, there had been surplus properties through council that we had approval. And 8 of actually the properties of Housing Now actually are part of the Bill Toronto property list right now. So they are being used for the purpose of Housing Now, and we will be reviewing each of the properties that sit with Bill Toronto, now Create TO, that were surplus years ago, and we'll be looking at each one of them and coming back to the appropriate groups and going through the board of Create TO.
And that's helpful background.
Okay.
I just need to be very, very clear in my understanding because I've heard 2 different things.
The intent.
When we created Create TO,
right.
The idea was never that we would just sell surplus land for condos, was it?
And that is correct. It was to create value, which was very different than just a dollar value.
So the claim that I read in a different staff report that if we didn't do Housing Now, the land simply would have been sold for condos was not accurate.
I'm not sure what the staff report is, and I could take
The
that
Housing Now
offline.
staff report that was in front of council.
Okay, I see that one.
Yeah,
actually-
that paragraph appeared there, and I just wanted to make sure Because some people in the public, you know, said, I've read that report, and it says that we were going to sell the land for condos. That was never the intention.
I would say probably 2 years ago or so, that was a discussion that was happening.
But not as of January 2019.
We're relooking at all the properties, and that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Bradford?
Thanks very much. Through the chair, Creatio is working on a strategic plan. Is that done yet?
I'll answer that too. So through the chair, Creatio is working on a strategic portfolio plan, which includes all the assets from a citywide perspective, including agencies, corps, and divisions. That plan will be coming to committee and council in May.
Kind of building off Councillor Perk's questions there. My understanding was there's 3 parts to Creatio's mandate. Is that how you guys describe it?
So through the chair, there are, and I would say it would be real estate stewardship, actually. It would also be supporting the programs to be able to deliver the services that the programs needs, as well as actually unlocking land value to create the city building.
Right. So it's about creating mixed income communities, creating affordable housing opportunities, city building, and also delivering a dividend to the city.
The important part is the city building, and
Right.
the value that you create could be a dividend that you bring back for
Right.
investment back into the city.
And that differentiates from the previous model with Build Toronto, where it was effectively about, you know, selling off city assets.
So I'd like to correct a little bit of that, Councillor.
Right.
I'd say in the beginning of Build Toronto, we may have seen that as actually selling the assets in that way. But in the last few years or so, with with new executive folks there, they've actually started to change that, and we start to see a lot more affordable housing, a lot more city building discussions. And now with Creatio, we'll see obviously it accelerate.
That's great. How many new staff is Creatio asking for in the budget?
We're asking for an additional 5 new staff.
Okay. And with all of the previous real estate organizations, we didn't have enough staff to address the new workload? You guys have a lot going on.
There is a lot going on. So in just a bit of background, to create Creatio, we took the legacy staff of 2 corporations, Build Toronto and TPLC. There were a lot of savings realized there that we reinvested into the new pillars that we added, which were the customer relationship management pillar and the portfolio strategy pillar. This year, as we've dived further into the portfolio strategy pillar, you know, we've seen that there's a lot of work to be done there. We've made great progress in 2018, and we look forward to coming back to council in Q2 to share that with you. But we do need additional assets to keep accelerating that work and identifying additional opportunities to unlock value.
Okay. I think it's important work. The budget, talking about the portfolio strategy, budget references the availability of surplus city properties to develop as a stress for the future financial sustainability of Creatio. You know, so we need to have these properties. How many properties have been deemed surplus and are awaiting transfer to Creatio based on the project in process?
Through the chair, actually, we'll come back to Councillor Bradford. I don't have that with me right now, but there are about 3 properties that from the Housing Now that we'll be working with. But all the surplus, Creatio has quite a few, or Build Toronto has quite a few surplus still, but there's none that are hanging out there right now. But we'll come back to if there's any that we come up with in the next few days. But as we come back with the portfolio plan, that will be an important discussion. And the surplus is to unlock the land value for further investment.
Okay. No. And final question, the budget references are required, and in our meeting I had with Creatio as well, like a change to the current financial model that might be necessary to sustain Creatio over the long term. Can you outline what that change is required and how this will help Creatio's long-term sustainability?
Through the chair, what we're doing with financial planning in the City of Toronto with Joseph Levite and Heather, our CFO, we're re-looking at the actual the financial model for Creatio and what we actually want to work with citywide is looking at the entire capital portfolio from a city perspective and actually looking at the operating operating costs too, and then coming back with what the actual financial model should look like for Creatio. Creatio is an enabler. It actually needs to make sure that it actually is part of the bigger discussion from a city perspective. So we'll be coming back, and then and their new CEO will be speaking to him in the next few months also to talk about that. So we'll be coming back with that.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What benefits, both financial and operational, have happened with the combining of all the real estate services in the city under this umbrella model?
Through the chair. Right, so I don't have the exact numbers in front of me here. They would be part of the 2018 notes. But on average, there was about $3 million of savings that were realized by combining Build Toronto and TPLC, the former organizations, into Create TO. And those savings were then reinvested into building out our new pillars in terms of the CRM pillar and the portfolio strategy pillar.
So if I can just complement that a little bit to the chair. When we went to council back in 2017, 2016, in 2017, the actual model was approved overall from a citywide real estate. We had actually stated there was about $1 billion of operating costs and just over $1 billion of capital. And when we had worked with Deloitte regarding what the possibility could be from a benchmark perspective, we had talked about a potential operational efficiency, but also reinvesting back into the organization of about 5 to 10%. Of operating as you start consolidating, getting purchasing power as you procure, any type of actual procurement you need for construction, that we would actually do it as a holistic from a city perspective. That would be for capital, it would also be for operating. So we have a 5-year plan. There's a 3-year incubation. We're in our 2nd year right now. We're going to start seeing some of that change, especially with the activities being consolidated between groups. So we'll be coming back in 2019 with what that potential efficiency was to invest back into the organization. So that is kind of the plan. We've planned that out with some of these parameters, and we'll be coming back with that. Okay.
Councillor Nunziata.
Yeah. So in the past, when we've disposed of city land, and you know which land I'm talking about, we haven't had any community consultation meetings at all. So with the new model, do we have protection for the community that we don't inform them after the sale is done and what the use is after the sale? And how are we going to consult with the community in the future, because we haven't had any consultation, especially when the land is contaminated?
Through the chair, and there is a process and a protocol through how we actually sell land. And I actually understand the one that you're referring to, Councilor Nunziata. So that is part of the process we have internally in the city as well as with Creatio, and that should not be happening going forward.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Layton.
That's all right. Thank you very much. So can I just get this straight? So you're in a 3-year incubation period right now where you're building out the organization. So you're still relying on facilities and real estate on the real estate management end, because that was eventually going to all get consumed by a central agency, right?
So through the chair, Councillor Layton, the actual organization, the model that we're referring to, has the planning, the strategy, and the client relationship management under Creatio. That's about 60 people or so. And then the rest of the facilities management, day-to-day management, and transactional actually sits within the city. And that we were not going to move that piece over, to tell you the truth. It's a huge amount of people we're talking about, but the model works together, and there is no duplication of efforts between the groups. So we're working together as one structure, moving the agenda forward around the real estate.
So the intent isn't to move the management of that piece into the Creatio?
Not on the mandate of Creatio, no.
Okay, so taking aside, so the management facility side isn't going to be part of Creatio. So the 3 years are to kind of transition from build to this new model just for the activation of properties?
The transition, through the chair, What it is actually any of the development that has been done in other agencies or corporations, as well as within the city, would be actually Createal's mandate as for planning and the development, so they look at it holistically, as well as the overall, also the overall client relationship management, working with counselors, working with the programs. And so that is actually part of the 3-year. We've actually done already some work with Toronto Parking Authority. There's work already being done by Createo for the development. We've also, on the city side, we've actually moved the leasing piece of Parks and Rec into the real estate arm of the city. So we're starting to do these movements of the activities. But one thing we did do right up front in late 2017, early 2018, was the authority levels. We moved into this new model and we actually adjusted the shareholder agreements within the corporations and agencies that the authorities would actually be dealt with through this new model of acquisition, disposition, or whatever we were doing.
So can I understand this, the budget notes on page 9, I get these costs, the annualization of positions and the branding, the reversal of the one-time branding fee. But then when you start getting to where the money comes in to make the net zero, it's the savings and reallocation of professional fees to Build Toronto and TPLC. Can you just explain that for us?
Our CFO will from Createo.
So right now, the way that the Createo model works is all the costs that are incurred in Createo are funded through the revenue that's generated from Build Toronto and TPLC. That's our that's our major funding source. So that's how we get to net zero, is we're incurring primarily G&A costs in Createo to support the city's real estate objectives, and those costs are being funded through the ongoing revenue and operations from Build Toronto and TPLC.
So would those be coming out of the city dividend that Build Toronto should be paying to?
Currently, they are not. That's something that we'll continue to discuss with our financial planning counterparts here on how we do that going forward.
Okay. Then how do they show up in the Build Toronto budget?
So in the Build Toronto budget, they show up as G&A costs. So if you look at the Build Toronto, there is a G&A cost which shows a management fee that it's paying to Createo. We have service agreements between the two corporations and the agency, and both corporations are paying a management fee to Createo because, again, all the management functions are happening at the agency for the corporations.
Okay. Then further down, there's an increased contribution from Build Toronto and TPLC in the base revenue changes. So you've got this revenue stream coming for the professional fees and then this increased contribution?
Sorry, through the chair, I think I added some confusion there, Councillor. Let me just backtrack. So the 149 is that net difference, which is coming from the two corporations, which I just explained. That 643, really what that is when we created the new agency in 2017 and we're preparing our 2018 budget, we had determined that there would no longer be any employees at the corporations, and as a result, we took all the G&A costs and moved them up to the agency. As we've gone through the current year and we've been going through the operations, we've quickly realized that there are some costs that truly are attributable to the corporations and therefore should not be sitting in the agency. These relate to legal fees related to the assets sitting at the corporations, audit fees, any consulting fees that would happen at that level. So those were costs that have been reduced out of the Createo budget because, again, not agency costs and attributed directly to the corps. That also includes board fees as well.
If I could just as a final note, in reviewing your projects online, you list a property at 28 Bathurst. The city has actually determined that that's going to be a park. It's listed as a potential for mixed-use development. It's been that way for several years now, so you may want to update your portfolio on the website.
That's a fair, through the chair, that's a fair point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, next we'll go to Toronto Parking Authority. Oh, I just want to mention to members that the TTC have just informed me they actually can get here before lunch, so depending on how we go, we may have an opportunity to have them present to us. So we'll just see how things go in the morning. Toronto Parking Authority is next. Questions? Okay. Councillor Bradford.
Great.
I just give them a sec to grab their seats.
Good morning. My questions are primarily pertaining to the bike share program. So through the chair, are we anticipating that as the cycling infrastructure is built out across Toronto with Toronto Bike Share, and that we can continue to build out the 10-year cycling network plan, do you forecast that Bike Share Toronto ridership will grow as we build out the network plan?
So to the chair, yes, it depends where it's built, but we definitely see a huge revenue where bike share stations are located on waterfront trails or park trails. Casual use is very high, so that has made a significant improvement. King Street pilot is actually, we placed a number of stations right on King Street as well that have seen an increase in casual use, as well as helped us meet the commuter traffic that has increased along King Street as well by bicycle.
Kind of building on that, when we look at successful cycle tracks and bike lanes, Adelaide and Richmond, obviously tremendous success, the Bloor Street pilot, do you see a notable increase in the use of these stations and the amount of bike share that comes in and out of those particular docking stations?
Through the chair, I'd have to do a deeper dive on the numbers, but yes, so in general, my observation is that places like Adelaide and Richmond have seen an increase. We've had an increase in trips. We've also, overall, the bike share program has been growing in use. So it's hard to distinguish between our overall growth and growth for a particular bike lane like Richmond or Adelaide. It would need some further investigation. But like I said, King Street, for example, I can say for sure that we've seen an increase in growth because of the change on King Street.
Would you say the same about Bloor? Like, put in that pilot?
Yeah, that's a harder one to distinguish because we've had stations there for a long time.
Okay.
And the general expansion north of Bloor Street that we've been doing drives up use.
Okay.
So, but for example, a street like Davenport, we have stations along there, and I think I could say that the use we do get on, say, Christie and Davenport is related to the bike lanes.
As the bike share ridership grows, will this improve our ability to secure sponsorships and advertising opportunities going forward?
Through the chair, yes. So one of the questions that large sponsors have is their valuation. What is the financial value I would get in return for sponsoring such a project? And it has a lot to do with our ridership, our membership that we have, like our annual members, our contact lists. And so as we add new stations, the number of riders increases per every station. So if you put a station in a neighborhood, in that 300 meters, we would expect at least 100 annual members to join up within the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so there's that exponential growth.
So one of the challenges as we expand the network out, which is great and something we have to do, is the 30-minute time window. So if you're coming from, the further ends of the east or the west, and you're trying to get downtown, you want to make commuting by bicycle a part of your routine, you want to use bike share, you got 30 minutes to do it. Have you guys thought about that? Is that something that you're looking into, how that impacts the ability for people to adopt this as a commuting mode share shift to bike share? But if you've got 30 minutes and a 35 or 40-minute ride, are we looking into that?
Yes, we do look into that. And our average annual member travels approximately 16 minutes. Our casual users travel closer to 30 minutes. And increasing the overage time is what we call that 30 minutes, to say something like 45. There would be a reduction in revenue from casual users if we did that. We have been looking at it in terms of annual and haven't made a decision to change it at this time.
So do you have a sense of, from the, I guess, the elasticity of that, how much revenue you must know how much revenue you're collecting from overages versus the opportunity of perhaps, I guess the challenge is just if you have to dock like halfway through a ride, then it's not really a very convenient option for commuting.
So through the chair, yes, from overage fees in general, bike share program collects up to about a third of our revenue from overages. So the change that you're asking about, so 45 minutes, could have a significant impact on our budget.
Are overages primarily with casual users or
Through the chair,
annual?
Yes. It is,
okay.
It is casual users, people riding on the waterfront trail, like I mentioned earlier, who are going for the day, and we get very little complaints about it. People feel it's a good value for what they're getting, that nice ride on the Toronto waterfront.
So maybe looking at the annual membership and some flexibility on the timing there for commuting purposes. Maybe I'll make a request on a briefing note or something about that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? We'll go outside to Councillor Perks and Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at pages 32 and 33 about the parking rate increase for 8 car parks. And I was a little surprised. It says in here that when you do parking rate increases, that goes to your board. I was just trying to understand how, like, when you're setting the parking rates on street at meters or in one of your car parks, do we do like a market survey of each area of the city to see what the private prices are? Do we look at demand? How does that all work?
Yes, we do. And if you, the off-street rate increase went to our board in October, and there's an attachment, a schedule to that report that goes through all that information, comparing our rates to the private sector.
So that's
rates.
at your board.
Yes.
I don't have that. I guess I could get that.
It's on the city's website. Obviously.
It's on the city's website. And so it's actually your board is charged with setting parking rates, not staff?
For the off-street parking facilities, it's under the direction of our board.
Yes.
For the on-street program, it's under council's direction. Either community council or council.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Oh. So it might be prudent of me to look at your market surveys before I get my vote on setting the on-street rates. Okay, I'll make a note to do that. I also see on the same page, the financial impact of the discounts that council directed you to give in the area around the King Street pilot. That's a revenue impact of total about $1 million, am I right about that?
That's correct. Currently, we're pacing at about 1.2 million on an annualized rate for both Eglinton Crosstown and the King Street pilot.
So I don't know who to ask this question of, probably not you, but I know that we have been measuring the heck out of everything having to do with the King Street pilot. Are we finding that there is a giant need to have parking discounts, or are we finding that more people are arriving in the area than used to arrive in the area? Are we finding that business receipts are up? Are we finding those kinds of things?
Mr. Chair, I believe that would be a question for our friends in transportation. So,
Mr. Chair, I made a good and honest effort to get all the briefing note requests written up. And I hadn't anticipated this one, but if we're going to continue to ask the parking authority to forego $1 million in revenue, I'm going to need to know whether that's necessary. So maybe that's another note I should write up.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Carroll, you had questions?
Well, it's just following on Councillor Perks' line of inquiry. I didn't know that we could move parking rate changes for on-street parking through council. Would that be, would that take the form of a request to the board? Or could we simply require them to do an economic development analysis and adjust their rates accordingly?
Traditionally, that's the form in which it's taken place. We've been directed by one of the standing committees of council to undertake a review and report back.
But we can direct as opposed to request?
Yes.
So if the business model of a street, well, not a model, but the business evolution of a street is such that it's now full of restaurants where people are paying $200 for a meal, and they're still only paying $4 to park there, we could actually address that through council by direction.
Yes, and traditionally you have, in fact, and right now we're on a 3-year reporting cycle with respect to the on-street. So it went last September, went through Government Management Committee, a large report. We effectively changed the rates at 80% of the location, increased the rates at about 80% of the metered locations in the city.
We did, but by a very small amount. It was a pretty modest increase, was it not?
It was 20, 33, or 50%, so I don't consider that very modest, actually.
Except they were pretty low to begin with, so 50% of $3 is $4.50. So to be fair to the board, you prefer that 3-year cycle?
Yes.
So having done it last year, we could contemplate this. If, for instance, the budget is under pressure in 2020, and we anticipate that it will be, we could, if we wanted to be thoughtful about it, we could come back in the 2020 saying we need you to move it up a year.
So that's the cycle we're on in any event currently, because we did 2017, so it would be 2020.
You spend that amount of time looking at it. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nunziata.
Just a question. So in areas where there's been improved transit, you know, where we have Metrolinx building all the stops along the corridor, are we looking, do we have someone looking on buying property for parking, the TPA, where there isn't sufficient parking?
So along Eglinton, we've purchased in the last 5 years, it's around that time, I think 4 or 5 properties for parking lots, a couple of which haven't opened, and there's one under construction now at Caledonia. So we have been responding to the Metrolinx project along Eglinton.
Okay, and what about Weston?
Well, councillors are aware, we just recently made an agreement with the property.
I know that area, but like Eglinton and, you know, because there's going to, as you know, in 2021, when that line opens, that there's going to be increased stops along the corridor. So are we looking at it and reviewing and studying those areas where there's a need for additional parking lots for us?
Yes, we have been, as I said, we've acquired a number of lots already along there, and we're continuing to monitor the availability of properties as we...
And then you'll bring it forward to council, right?
Well, it'll be through the new real estate process, so we'll come to council from us and CREATO.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I actually have a question myself. Oh, actually, we'll do Councillor Layton first, and I'll...
Thank you very much. Just on a couple of questions. One, the bike share total revenue growth, it's $1 million. Is that predicted from membership, or is there a rate change? Is there a membership cost change?
To the chair, no, there is not a rate change anticipated. That's by having more equipment on the road and therefore new and more members.
Growth in, yeah, sure. And so that's what's driving the subsidy per ride down to essentially zero.
Yes, there's also anticipated in the next year of sponsor being signed that would bring it down to zero.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, originally when Bixby came into being, there was a number that was set for what would make this a cost-neutral proposition from year to year. What what number was that for the number of bikes and stations, and what number are we at? Do you recall?
I do recall it, and it's not too dissimilar to today. It's usually about 30% of total revenue is coming from a source other than user fees. So it could be advertising, it could be a subsidy, it could be a sponsor. So if you have that's been pretty universal across North America, if you're having the same type of service level that we provide.
I'm just wondering how far off were we from the estimates way back when about how big the fleet had to be in order to attract that type of advertisement or sponsorship and generate the revenue from the bicycles? Maybe it's something we can have a chat about another time. I'm just wondering if it was drastically different than what we thought. Because our initial investment was quite small, I recall, which is why perhaps it didn't make financial sense from an operating point of view.
Yeah, I would happy to explain in detail that. And there's, of course, been reports to council on it. The feasibility study that Toronto Parking Authority did a couple of years ago to expand to over 5,000 bikes basically looked at areas where we would have the similar cost recovery as the original program. And beyond that, the chances of that recovery are decreased. So it's basically one station per 1,000 residents. We're likely to make 70% user fee revenue. So and be happy to sit down and discuss that.
Okay. Just two more questions. One, there's a line that says reduced equipment repair. So that's a cost savings to achieve the target. So what's the consequence of not repairing our equipment? I don't think this is bike share specific. I think this is across the board.
No, this is truing up at our actual pace rate for our maintenance expenditures. We've undertaken a warranty program, and this has reduced.
Okay, so this isn't, because it says base savings to achieve target, so it sounds like we're taking money out of maintenance because we just want to hit a target rather than this is really what the cost is.
No, it was designed to reflect our current pace rate.
Okay. The last question, the revenue loss from car-to-go operations. So there's a lot of stories about why we no longer have car-to-go or in the city, and one of them related to the relationship that car-to-go had with the TPA. I'm just curious about did we initiate the removal of car-to-go cars from TPA lots, or was it car-to-go that said, no, we no longer want to have this relationship with you?
So it was a business decision by Car2Go, and they never actually severed the use of our lots. They just reduced it substantially when they made the business decision to try to encourage their members to park on the street.
Will legally park on the street.
Well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I just had a quick question with regard to, we just recently passed the Housing Now report last week at council with the 11 properties. As part of that, and I have two of the properties in my ward, but there's a potential loss of significant commuter parking. Have you had any conversations, will you be having any conversations, maybe premature, I'm not sure, with city staff on any opportunities to replace some of the significant commuter parking that may be created from these properties?
So we've had a number of discussions with Crete TO and Res Services over that issue. It's a very challenging thing to do because of the economic profile of commuter parking lots, but we're certainly pursuing them, and one project which is underway now is at Bessarion Station, where we're building parking in conjunction with a community center, which we think will be underused during the day, so there'll be a cross-use of commuter parking in that location.
So you haven't looked at other opportunities in and around, whether it's on those specific sites or reasonably close to any opportunities to, again, when I'm looking at just my two wards, one of them, we're losing upwards of 900, potential 900 commuter spots. And there could be impact to that, so I'm just wanting to get a sense if there's any opportunity to look at other options.
As I say, we've been discussing it with Crete TO, and maybe we can report back on our findings.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions. Next, we'll go to Toronto Region Conservation Authority, TRCA. And we do have some questions. Councillor McKelvey.
Mr. Chair, thank you for coming in with the weather. My question is about the ravine strategy. I was wondering if you could just give a high level of the objective and then also its funding status. The ravine strategy. So it's on page 28 in the briefing note.
Conversations within all the different groups to figure out how to best coordinate the ravine strategy and the funding within there.
And so it says in the report that it will have a list of the sites that require restoration and the costs of that. When you prepare that report, will you also give the cost of doing nothing? So if we don't invest in these ravines, what is the cost that would be associated with the increased flooding and pressures from urbanization? Will you be able to give us a ballpark on that as well?
Through the chair, we'll be doing our best to show the opportunity cost of not doing the work compared to doing the work, yes.
Okay. And right now, how are you dealing with contingencies, like with emergencies, so erosion that's unexpected or flooding that's unexpected? How do you deal with that on a year-by-year basis?
Through the chair, right now what we're doing is doing our best to operate on our reserves if need be, and then coming back to City Council on an emergency basis if additional work would be required.
So if we invest in this ravine strategy heavily, that will help us in the future so we're not coming into these emergencies or having to draw down on these reserve funds?
Through the chair, absolutely.
Okay, and then my second question is, I have the privilege of living in Ward 25 and representing Ward 25, which I also notice is the two projects that fall under your issues impacting future years are both in my ward, and so both are unfunded, and I'm wondering if you could speak to what would be happening on the Toronto Wildlife Centre and the Scarborough Waterfront project, because that's large amounts of money that are needed, and I'm not sure what the plan is to get it.
So for the Scarborough Waterfront project, we do have our final environmental assessment in front of the Minister of Environment right now. They are currently just finishing their ministry review, which will be sent out to the public very shortly for a number of weeks for them to review. At this point, they have not highlighted any issues that have arisen as a result of the review. So we are asking for the council to give us some money to advance some of the detailed design work for the west segment, which was not controversial within the Scarborough Waterfront project, so that we can refine our numbers, so that we can start having more conversations with the individual city divisions, so that we could advance some discussions on who might be responsible for what element of funding, and to make sure that we're meeting all the city's priorities as well. And one of the priorities has been the Brimley Road improvements to separate pedestrians from the car access, so we want to be as prepared as possible to advance that as quickly as possible in 2019 if we do have a positive decision from the minister.
Sorry, in the Toronto Wildlife. So both of these well situated in my ward, in Scarborough Waterfront, across this, like the whole region uses them. So I want, they're very important projects for everybody. Can you also speak to like the status of the funding for the Toronto Wildlife Centre?
Absolutely. So through the chair, we've been working with the Toronto Wildlife Centre in order to get them ready to get into a state of move-in condition. They believe that at some time this year they're going to be evicted and need to move into the new lands. So we're currently working with them on grading the property, doing some work on the site, and also, as you've seen in council, the new motion that went through to do some services on the barn and the house there in order to get them up and running when they need to be. In addition to that, they're still looking for additional funding from the city in order to help build the larger site. So we've done our roadshow for the last couple of years to our municipalities trying to drum up support. We've had some difficulties in doing so, but we're committed to them to continue helping and promoting as much as we can.
And while I think it's great that we're going to have this temporary solution for the Wildlife Center, kind of like a MASH unit, it's been described to me, do you worry that having this temporary solution hinders the ability to get the permanent solution in the funding going forward? Or are you confident that we'll be able to get this funding from our partners?
Through the chair, I don't think it hinders it at all. I think it's the immediate need in order for them to get that MASH unit up and running. And if anything, I think it's going to show how much it's needed for there to be a full-time and full capacity building up and running.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, for those of us who aren't on the board, maybe give us an update on there's a dynamic relationship between the municipalities. You sort of alluded to it, drumming up support municipality to municipality. What's the current formula for equity in terms of funding the authority? Is it sort of we're the biggest envelope, so whatever we put forward, the others are not prepared to go beyond that ratio? What's the dynamic relationship right now?
Absolutely. So through the chair, overall TRCA is made up of several partner municipalities. We have the City of Toronto, which is our largest. We have York Region, Durham, Peel, and then Mono and Tuscarino as well. The way the CVA formula works, our current value assessment, we get that every year from our provincial ministry, and then from that we allocate the portion of value to each of our partner municipalities. So you'll see in here the share for Toronto is about 65%. Okay.
And do we simply take the request, you do the budget and then 65%, and we decide whether or not we're giving it all to you or something less than that? Does our contribution have an impact, plus or minus, on the rest of the municipalities, or do we simply present whatever it is you've asked for? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do you respond to the targets we're setting versus how an inside division entirely reliant on the City of Toronto responds to our targets?
So through the chair, we do a great job working with staff in order to determine what we're able to go in at. Because of the way the CVA formula works, theoretically, if Peel goes in up 3%, if Toronto were only to go in up 1%, it suddenly throws off the formula. So as you'll see on the document on page 25, there's a row there called non-CVA levy, which is the portion which is not allocated properly anymore. So you'd see the Peel's giving about 300,000, York 248, and Durham is 67. And that's because for a couple of years when Toronto was holding at 0%, our other partner municipalities were not. So that's led to the difference that now exists.
So we've fallen behind. Are we addressing that this year? Is that how this works?
So you'll see in the report, we're asking for it to be a discussion point to figure out how we can reduce it or eliminate it in the future.
Have you presented I'm sorry I haven't read all of the plans and not being a board member, despite having requested every term, I should say. Have you presented a rational plan for how we might do that over multiple years?
For now, we've just had preliminary conversations about how we would be able to get it back on track. And then if there are more fruitful discussions as to the opportunities, because we understand Toronto's budgetary pressures, we would present a more fruitful plan on how we would establish that.
Okay, and I have one more question. I don't know if this is the case in other places. In many cases in my ward where I head into a ravine, there are parklands and then they're adjacent to the TRCA authority. If in parks we are suspending funding any kind of state of good repair, maintenance, or addressing of naturalized paths, trailways that are adjacent to TRCA, is that going to have an impact on that area? If we're not doing our maintenance, does that have an impact on your work?
Absolutely. We do our best to work with the Parks and Forestry team on the work that they're doing. And I liken this similar to the work that we're doing in the Meadowway right now, where we're working in concert. And yeah, as you said, a lot of the parks and the lands are adjacent to each other. So we do try and work as best as possible to establish the priority work that needs to get done.
So their budget this year says don't add anything there. They're slowly winding down any kind of focus on that in the capital plan they presented us yesterday. That could present a challenge if you've committed capital in those areas where you had planned on working with them?
Yeah, it definitely does present a challenge. And I think if I read the report correctly, I think it said in 10 years, then all of the trails would be in a state of disrepair.
Yep.
Which definitely puts us at odds. And when the public is trying to use the trails and they don't understand that the money is not coming from TRCA or it's not coming from the City of Toronto, then it just creates a larger issue.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just had a quick question with regard to the Scarborough Waterfront project. So last year, you brought the below-the-line request for about $140 million, as I understand. So it is at the Ministry of the Environment. You're waiting for the final approvals. That should be coming out hopefully this year or soon. But you did mention a request for detailed design dollars, and I think primarily around the Brimley Road reconstruction. So can you clarify what that actually is? And I don't recall seeing the number. What's that number you've been requested?
So for the Scarborough West segment, we had asked for 0.305 in 2019 and some additional funding for 2020 for the construction portion of it. But for the detailed design, sorry, I'm just trying to. We have asked for, I can't see it.
I'm trying to find it.
So 305,000.
What is it, 305,000?
Sorry, in the chart and the notes, it looks like it's 2.171, but it says for 2020.
So so I'm confused. So 2.171, that's for the entire project.
I think it's for the specific 0.305.
So it is 0.305.
Okay, well, just $300,000. Just a question to financial planning with regard to this ask, and again, it's all dependent on, of course, the Ministry of the Environment moving forward on this. Do we have capacity on? I'm concerned about this $305,000, whether it's needed, or do we have the ability or capacity on the city side on moving forward on the Brimley Road reconstruction as quickly as possible?
Right. So through you, Mr. Chair, we're just trying to get the breakdown, but if you look on page 18 of the notes, there's a total of $4.9 million on the first line called Asset Infrastructure Management. It's actually has funding built into that over a 2-year period to do 2 things. Continue design work on Scarborough Waterfront as they wait for the EA, and secondly, to do the design work for Brimley Road and the reconstruction. So we have accelerated that based on the recommendation from last.
Okay, so we already have the funding
In the capital
budget. So, okay, then you don't need that 300,000. If you're already requesting it, but it's already in the capital budget to do. Okay, so you don't need the $300,000. Okay, thank you. Okay. Let's move on to the next, Toronto Atmospheric Fund. No, just checking. I know Councillor Kerr wasn't here before. Okay, so next we're going to be, is Councillor Layton. Can I just need you here. So this is just for the benefit of, we have the accountability officers coming. They're going to do a presentation. Then we also have TTC coming, so I want to get a sense of where we are on questions. On the second tranche, which is corporate services, financial, treasury, and other city programs. So now that we have all the councillors here, if possible, to run down, and if there's no questions on any particular division, they don't necessarily have to be here, because I don't know how long that'll take, so it's just to benefit them. So let me run down very quickly. 311, Toronto, do we have questions? Okay. Facilities, we have questions. Fleet services, Okay, information and technology, IT questions. Okay, looks like we're going to be asking questions. Office of the CFO. Well, the CFO has to be here anyway, so. Office of the Controller. Financial Services, capital only. No questions. Okay. On the other programs, City Manager's Office, are there questions? Okay, so we have at least one. So Legal Services. Okay, City Clerk's Office. Yep. City Council. Okay, that's very telling. Office of the Mayor, are the questions? Okay. And okay, so that now we just get a sense of, so everybody knows what to anticipate. Okay, now we'll go to the accountability officers. We have the Auditor General, the Lobbyist Registrar, and the Office of the Ombudsman. So. I believe there are analyst notes. Yeah, they're over there.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. First of all, I'd like to say that this is our recommended budget, but I'd like to thank my team who put it together. It was Ina Chan, Jane Ying, they're both Assistant Auditor Generals. Also Grace Young from the City Manager's Office and Nero Mochevich from my office. There are three key messages that I'd like to convey within this presentation. Number one, we are a net positive benefit to the city. The recommendations that we identify do generate, through the implementation and the symbiotic relationship with the city divisions, they do generate positive savings for the city. Number two, this is a stand-pat budget. We're not asking for additional funding. We'd like to stay at the level that we have, and it is a challenge to work within that, but that's what we're asking for. And number three, the only piece that we would like to do is to stabilize temporary positions. There's 4 junior positions within our organization. I'd like to stabilize those so that we can plan for the succession planning over the coming years. So referring to our slides, we've provided you with a full slide presentation based on the templates that are provided to the city, but I'm only going to speak to 9 of them. This provides an overview of my mandate and how the relationships work, for clarity for the new councillors specifically. Under the City of Toronto Act, my role is to assist City Council in holding itself and city administration accountable for the quality of stewardship over public funds and for the achievement of value in operations. And essentially, City Council directs the city to accomplish certain mandates, and they're responsible to make sure the city council is responsible to make sure the city has controls in place. City management carries out the work and reports back. My role is to take an independent, objective review of the work being conducted at the city and provide that information to City Council. It's City Council's role to hold the city accountable. It's not my role. I just provide a bit more transparency, a bit more objectivity. There's 3 business lines. We have performance audits. I'll include in there, there's financial audits, compliance audits, value for money audits. And then we have the fraud and waste hotline. And there's 2 pieces to that. One are complaints that come in. And the second is, in order to protect people who are, well, I would say, whistleblowers, or people who have identified waste and want us to investigate, City Council, through the City of Toronto Act, has provided to us the mandate to investigate allegations of reprisal. And the reason I mention it this year is because we are finding it a challenge. Those allegations have to be addressed in a very quick way because it does affect people. And so we're getting a few of those, and our challenge is really to keep managing to deliver on those. So that's a little bit of a challenge in our budget. And our IT and audit strategy is an area that I've taken on since I've been here. Down to the numbers. We have numbers up here on performance, but what I can say is there's certain numbers we can control and certain numbers we can't. The numbers that we don't control are the number of complaints that come in. There's 640 complaints that come into the hotline, and that's about 1,000 allegations plus. And we don't control, we help to influence, but we don't control the amounts of the savings. We can control the number of recommendations, we can control some other outputs like the number of investigations. But truly, I only count my performance and my outcomes based on transformation and continuous improvement that happens within the city. So when I look at the amount of money that with the city's cooperation and they've implemented the recommendations, we can show that each year we, for every dollar invested, what we can say is over 5 years, we compared 5-year value invested in my office to the 5 years and efficiencies identified, implemented, and you can show there's probably a 1 to 10 relationship. Let me give you a quick example on that. We had a recommendation in relation to York Region water agreement, and we saw an opportunity for a win-win relationship between the city and York Region. So we provided the recommendation to renegotiate aspects of that agreement. Based on Lou DeGeronimo's really taking that and taking the bull by the horns and renegotiating that, over the next 5 years, there's going to be probably at least 33 million, maybe up to 50 million, additional volumes being purchased by York Region, which is, results in additional revenues coming back to the city to help to defray the infrastructure costs that have already been put in place. So that's the kind of recommendation we make. That one recommendation pays for my office and probably the accountability framework for the next 5 years at the current funding. So it just gives you an example, and that agreement was signed and accepted by York Region Council. So the next slide, get into my challenges. We had a significant number of retirements when I started, just before I started, and then actually in the initial part of my term. And so what I'm doing is growing staff within the office through training and cross work to make sure that they have the skills they need. Also providing them with development opportunities. So 70% of the people within my office, they're in their positions for less than 3 years. It's working, but I think in order to retain staff and to continue to develop for the future, we should be solidifying some temporary staff at the lowest levels because we're going to have upcoming retirements. I will be completed within another 2 and a little bit years, maybe almost 3 years. There's another significant retirement at the top, so we're going to be bringing staff up through the organization. So this is part of my succession plan. It's hard to retain temporary staff when there's opportunities, permanent opportunities out there. So again, I'm not asking for more money this year, but I'm asking you to assist me with stabilizing my organization. So there's 3 key strategies that I'm using. Number 1, I'm making a request in this budget, if it's possible, to help to solidify those 4 positions. In the past 2 years, this council has assisted by providing additional temporary funding to my office. Should that funding go in the future, the net impact of these 4 positions is $400,000 because they're at the lowest level. The second and the third items in my key strategies are to continue to develop a skilled workforce and to create capacity by cross-training. And I'm focused on those items. We have this year become a CPA certified training office. We have been reviewed internationally, and our training is some of the best. That's the feedback that we have. And we're growing and we're focusing on development opportunities. I'd like to retain the temporary staff. So moving to our work plan. Our work plan is presented before the Audit Committee on February 22nd. There's a number of projects in there this year. We're working on some shelter, housing and support. We're working on some affordable housing. We're looking at opportunities in the fleet services. We're still working on parks and recreation. We're looking at some big engineering projects that we're auditing right now. That plan. So what happens is our work plan, our budget, and our outcomes for the year are presented on the 22nd to the audit committee, and they look at everything together and do an analysis of it, and then they make a recommendation to council regarding the projects and the budget, as well as the budget committee makes their separate recommendation. Getting to the numbers, in 2017 and 2018, I received $1 million the first year, and I think $500,000 last year. And we focused on projects that identified opportunities for savings. The city has taken those savings, and that they really have, in those areas, really initiated implementation. For example, 85% of the amount in 2017 and 2018, in 2018, 87% of the savings identified for 2018, and they're savings that have been realized, meaning like the York Region contract, it's implemented, come from 2016-2017 recommendations. So management has put a focus on that, and I'd like to thank them for those efforts. Truly, the savings outweigh the costs, and we only count savings when they're actually implemented. Although there's still potential saving on the books, only when the work has been done and implemented do we identify that saving and then make a projection over 5 years if there is a recurring element to it. And finally, what I can say is not only in relation to money, we talk about money, but there's so many other benefits. I look at projects like the York fire investigation that really really is helping to identify safety issues across the city and potentially across the province. And the Toronto Fire has been able to secure some convictions in relation to that just recently, and some fines. And that would be a kind of project that would come up that has a non-financial benefit in relation to the court services, trying to make sure that everybody is treated in a consistent manner based on legislation, and that's important. And around the urban forestry, we noticed that the bylaw could be enhanced to make sure those who don't abide by the bylaw don't have an easier ride than those who do abide by the bylaw. So last slide relates to the ask, and the 2.1% is strictly performance, COLA, the normal budget, operating budget increases. Zero, no net new dollars. We're asking for a sustainment of the current investment. We will continue to work as diligent as we are. And we're asking for securing of the temporary positions that were granted last year, and they're at the most junior level. So with that, I'd just like to reiterate the key messages. We're delivering value. It's a stand-pat budget subject to the securing of the temporary positions, and we continue to provide long-term benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Outside councillors, Councillor Perks, you okay? Okay, Councillor Carroll.
Yes, just the temporary positions. It's not written into the budget analyst notes as a recommendation now. We'll have to move it. So just refresh my memory. When they came in as temporary, was it project specific or volume based? I can't remember.
It was based on when council provided me with additional temporary funding, $1.5 million over the past years. Council also approved 4 temporary positions.
Right.
They were at the lowest professional level of the organization, and we're training them into the positions. Yeah.
Right. And it was, but it was based on volume.
It was, yes, based on doing more projects, correct.
Right. So we based it on, we were asking for bigger and bigger and more inquiries. That volume has continued, hasn't it?
Yes, correct. And it won't stop. There's some key projects that we need to get to, some major engineering projects. We're doing a large winter maintenance project next year. That's a concern. It's already been identified as on the horizon, and we're doing that next year. We do have a lot of complaints on that. And there's large contracts. You're going to renegotiate your winter maintenance contracts within the next 3 years. So having the information now consistent with the LTD project when we're renewing those contracts, having the analysis now, the roadmap of how to design those agreements is going to be really key to the city. So those are the big major projects we're undertaking this year.
Right. And the temporary contract positions, if we don't move that recommendation, they work to the end of this year, or they're already due to be sent home?
Well, what happens is, if with flexibility for budget funding, we may be able to, keep them on somehow of a contract basis, but I can tell you that we have lost people within the temporary positions after we bring them on, and as soon as a permanent position opens up, they go to that. And so we've invested, we're doing our part by investing in being extra time at our time and becoming a certified CPA office so that they can get their credentials. And then we, have a specifically designed training program that really is reinvesting over and over in people who are just coming on temporary. It doesn't really make any sense.
Okay.
Especially when we are able to show that it's a net positive benefit to the city.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you have a return of 10 to 1?
That is correct. It's actually higher. That doesn't include the net, the York Region contract, and it doesn't include some IT that was identified in the budget, but we didn't identify it in our savings. So yes, it's going to be a little higher for the annual report, correct.
And is that a trend that's been holding steady, increasing, decreasing?
It depends on really the number of projects that we do, but we select our projects based on risk. In other words, there are some projects that don't have any savings. It depends on the risk to the city. Now, the risk to the city can be not having money in the budget, but the risk could be, for example, it could be the hacking of the IT system. It could be buildings burning down. It can be, so you can't, it's not always a one-to-one, so you might get less, but it's definitely positive. Like anything, I would say $4 to $5 is a good year. And it's not, we are required by law to report back. So it's not something that I'm thinking, oh, look at us, that kind of thing. It's not the way that we work. And it doesn't work unless we have the full cooperation of the city management, and they are focused on where they can make a difference in relation to those things that are efficiency and saving later. They are focused on those items.
And aside from financial-based audits, do you cover what other sorts of things are covered? Because there's money, but there's also schedule and all kinds of other things that are involved in that.
Goodness, yes. We've just modernized 2 of our systems this year. We had I would say a fractured database, a database that was breaking down and no longer supported. So we have modernized our systems this year. We've had an international peer review that found us to be at the top level of the audit offices, and the international peer review team came in. And the reason that's important is because we have to operate based on fairness and to back up what we say. And so it really is important and I'm required by law to comply with standards. We have other projects underway that we have. We have, of course, our CPA training program, which was developed this year. So there's a number of initiatives underway. And I can also say that what we produce is not actually all on the books. There are ongoing investigations that may never see the light of day if it turns out that there is nothing wrong, but it doesn't stop us from doing that major piece of work. So behind the scenes, there's lots going on. The last thing I can say is, some of the projects that happen, and we have a large TTC project that's going to be tabled in February, and it relates to fair revenue and fair evasion. That took a double team to do. So it's not always a one-to-one relationship, so we have to staff based on how big the project is.
So when you conduct your audits, though, you're looking at financial, but are you also looking at quality, and what are the other sorts of?
Yes, so there's a number. So we look at financial controls in projects. We also look at the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. When we say value for money, it's whether the management has implemented the council's recommendation in a cost-effective manner. And so we look at that. We look at IT, security. We look at any risks to the city. So that's part of our audit. So it's performance, that we call that performance audit. And then there's some financial control audit. We're doing a cash management reserve audit this year. And then the last piece is IT.
So would you be a department that, for example, would be happy to work yourself out of a job? So if your 10-to-1 went down to 5-to-1 or 2-to-1, is this a good news story for you?
Yeah, yes, I think the city itself actually is good news. So there's lots of great leaders. I think the challenge is in a state of flux, in a state of change with the city, and with growing and reducing budgets, when you have a large, and sometimes you have older sectors, like for example, in the transportation sector, the structure that it came into the city with 30 years ago or 20, it was the same. So we're modernizing. As you make those changes, there are opportunities for efficiencies. I always liken it to squeezing the toothpaste. There's two kinds of people, somebody who grabs the toothpaste and you get some efficiencies, and then there's others, like my husband, who rolls it up to make sure he gets everything out of it. And so you have to grab the toothpaste and brush your teeth, but you also have to go back and roll it out to make sure you get everything out of it. So yes, I'd be happy to work myself out of a job, but at the same time, there's going to be always an opportunity to roll that toothpaste up and get the best efficiencies out.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nunziata, did you have some questions?
Just the one question that I've been asking. So when am I going to get the list? Where do I get the list on? As you know, I've asked that every year, is on the millions of dollars that you have been able to achieve in savings in the various departments and the recommendations you made. So where can we see that in the departments, that there were actually a line item where it shows that they've actually saved the amount that you projected and that they should have saved? Do we see that in their budget?
So thank you, and through you, Chair, I'm going to ask Ina to kindly put up a table, and I'm going to take two bites at the apple. The first is, we did listen last year, and we worked with the financial planning and Josie Levita's group to identify and for staff to record in their budget when they do have a saving. And Ina, if you can put it up to one example, maybe courts, if that would be a good one. It's not in this slide deck, but so that's the first thing. So this would be an example of what you would see within your briefing notes, or not your briefing notes, sorry, your analyst notes. You will see where they reference the Auditor General's office. What we have done is we've taken each of these, Councillor, and we've prepared a table, and that table is, we have it done, so if you request it, we will provide that to you with the supporting documentation of everything in the notes. This table is in our annual report. The reason it isn't here today, because it's a timing issue. We're trying to see what's happening and what's being included in the budget and preparing the table, and it's a bit of a moving target, but we're comfortable providing you with it if you request it through a briefing note.
So in your opinion, we've actually there were actual savings in the departments. Like, yes. I remember a couple of the budgets where there was a request to increase the budget because in the following years there would be a savings of a few million, millions of dollars. So have we achieved? So I just want to make sure that we've achieved the savings that was predicted. And
we are achieving them. Could you put up the slide with the yellow on it, Ina? The yellow value slide.
Because I don't want to see creative accounting. I want to see the actual.
Yeah, I'll use this this slide for example. Up on that figure one up on the left, you will see in the last year that we identified, for example, this is very small, but we identified a potential for, I think it was 81 million in the green.
This is realized, that's potential.
Oh, so yeah, so the green was realized, and what was the number there? Sorry. I know you can see this better than I can. So the green part was what we called realized savings that were 78 million, and the potential we identified was actually 61 million. That would be the gray above the green bar. Okay, so that's what we identified. This year, because we've continued to take that $1 million and do extra projects and do a deeper dive, there's 101 million that's realized. The yellow is the York region that I just spoke about, and then there's some other potential that is on the gray in the top. So it is coming through. It's tied into the budget. The divisions do agree, and we work through that with the CFO.
Okay, so we'll see, there's a separate line item that shows this.
That's correct. And I'll give
Okay.
you a reference to every single line item in every budget. So if you ask for it, I'll give it to you.
I just want to make sure.
But it's thanks to your recommendation
thank
that
you.
we've done that, yes.
Thank you.
Council, I'd suggest writing up a quick little briefing note request, just so the Auditor General can get it to us, so we can actually review that as part of the budget. Yeah, no, so it is here, we just have to formally ask for it in a briefing note. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now go on to the Office of the Lobbyist Registrar.
I'm pleased to provide a brief overview of the 2019 recommended operating and capital budgets. Before I begin, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Grace Young of City Clerks and her team who are helping me today, but throughout the year with their support and, of course, all the labor that they've put into helping the numbers make sense for us. When I went to law school, I left my numbers brain somewhere else, and so I'm totally dependent on the expertise that they generously provide our office. I'd also like to thank Betty Au, Connie Volpe, Stephen Littlejohn, and Karen Hutchison for their assistance in preparing these materials for you. What you have before you is information we've populated to satisfy your template, but in the interest of time for everyone, I'm pleased to just give you a very quick run through on all the slides. So if we go to the office map, just to remind everyone of the important mandate our office provides to all of our city stakeholders for transparency and accountability in how government decisions are made. In other words, who's speaking to who and about what, all that information is captured on our registry, and the ethical standards at which we hold our stakeholders who do engage with you, and what those standards are and how we adhere to those standards as a group of stakeholders is something that's governed by the Lobbyist Code of Conduct. So in essence, we have a staff team who delivers their expertise divided into two units. There's a team that takes care of the lobbyist registry. It's a small group, but mighty. There's 3 lobbyist registry advisors who take care of maintaining the registry, providing advice, and also taking shared responsibilities with our investigative unit in delivering education opportunities and maintaining our website. The other group of our staff is the investigations unit, who's tasked with the important role of ensuring there's enforcement. The rules that you have codified in the bylaw that reflect your values for transparency need to have credibility behind them, and they need to have a detrimental effect by letting the public know that these rules will be enforced and there will be penalties imposed when an investigation is complete and if it brings forward that a breach has in fact happened. So if we go to the next slide, I can summarize that quickly by letting you know that there's basically 3 functions for regulation to work. And that's a registry system, that's the lens for the public. And the second thing is education and outreach, and you have thirdly enforcement, which I just outlined. What you'll see from my staff complement, though, is that we don't have a staff dedicated to education, and so the 2 units are working on their respective duties as mandated under the legislation, but they're also partnering together and taking on additional work to satisfy the education and outreach requirements. And in the end, it's through outreach and education that you get compliance. And with a small staff team, we have to recognize
that when you're doing robust education activities, you're actually taking away from your ability to do the registry service in a quick and timely fashion. You're putting strain on the investigation unit because you'll get compliance at the front end through the registrations that you require. However, the speed and length of time that we are able to deliver our investigations is being compromised. So if we go to our experiences and successes quickly, I just want to highlight for you in a tangible way what transparency really means. So last year in 2018, there were approximately 4,000 lobbying communications in that 1 year alone that were captured on our registry. And if you go to point 2 and point 3, with respect to the registry team, what their work is engaged in on a daily basis is bringing that to life, capturing those 4,000 lobbying communications. And what it looks like is 1,835 active lobbyist registrations for the year and 2,702 active subject matter registrations. And so if you go to point 3, what you'll see is the total number of transactions, in other words, that it takes to support a registry that shows you the 3,800 lobbying communications. Also, behind those 3,800 lobbying communications is the work of our investigations unit at point number 4. They provide advice and opinions up front. They also engage throughout the year in consultations with all public office holders, including city staff, councillors who may be engaging with various lobbyists and providing advice on how to redirect lobbyists to comply. So with 230 consultations, you're seeing the work of the 2 units give rise to the meaningful information that's behind the registry. And points 6 and 7 are just simple examples of the type of education and outreach that the 2 units are trying to push together at the same time as delivering what their mandate requires them to do. So with respect to the challenges that I want to highlight, I think the first point really summarizes it the best in that your model is a success story in that since 2010, the number of registrations at transactions processed annually has increased by almost 400%. However, the current staff complement has not changed since 2009. So the outreach activities and the provision of advanced opinions and consultations are being performed at the detrimental cost to formal investigations. So the inquiries and investigations capacity to take on new matters is restricted, and there's delays in the length of the investigative process. So that combined with the increased complexity of legal issues and the recent expansion of the OLR's enforcement powers is giving rise to this need for an influx of additional resources. Also, we are trying very hard to come forward to the 21st century, and there's some capital asks that I'm going to review with you today that both pertain to technology upgrades. So that also presents some challenges to the staff who not only have to plan for that, but we have to budget for it, and it's all in addition to their existing duties to fulfill the mandate. It's becoming increasingly challenging. So if we go to the priority actions, I can summarize for you quickly that in sum, what I'm asking for today is 1 additional position for the registry unit, another position for the investigations unit, and I'm asking for some additional sums of money for the investigative unit in the sum of $25,000 for investigation costs and $25,000 for legal costs. And they're outlined according to your format further on in the presentation, but when I describe the priority actions on this page, it's that this is the context for that ask. So we think in being provided with these enhancements, the additional monetary resources for inquiries and investigations will enable us to keep pace with the complex
cases in a timely manner. The additional money for external legal advice and for a junior counsel will ensure that the utmost due diligence is taken given the contentious nature of investigations and the possibility of judicial review. I just want to emphasize that when our office does an investigation, we are investigating people who are not privy or not part of the city. They're third parties. And so there is an obligation on us to proceed within administrative law principles, and there's requirements for fairness. Oftentimes, those individuals seek legal representation, and they're represented by counsel, which is very helpful to the process, and we encourage that. However, getting information and the extent of time it takes to do an investigation takes longer because of that. So these enhancements will enable compliance and therefore decrease investigations and prosecutions, and this will alleviate the demand on this investigations unit's already limited resources. And we're confident that the amount of time an investigation will be completed and will be reduced. And the additional position for the lobbyist registry and stakeholder outreach advisor will enable that registry unit to continue to deliver timely and accurate services to the public and lobbyists. So I just want to underscore, I don't have the ability to give you tangible things in the way other services do, but it's your value system for transparency and civic engagement that you've mandated through the bylaw that our office tries to give rise to. And I don't think there is a cost that can be put to that or a value. It's invaluable, because I do believe that if the public does have the transparency that's outlined in the bylaw, you will have the public's trust and confidence, and the decisions that you come to will be more likely to be supported by the public, because they will be viewed as having been arrived at in a fair manner, with all the information that they would need to know about who may have influenced that decision, and they may be able to say that they'd like to or not also have a say in that with you. So let's take a look quickly. I'm coming to the end, but this is just a visual representation of what I'd like to call your success, because you can see from the year that we started tracking these numbers in 2010, the registry has continued to capture on an exponential growth line more and more communications, which means if we go to the words of Madam Justice Bellamy, in that we want to nourish and nurture an ethical culture, you're achieving that, and you're getting better at it every year, because it's year-over-year growth. Your stakeholders are complying, and they're showing you all of their communications. So it's also a testament to the fact that the work that our office is doing in outreach and education is being effective, because the model is being used, and that is really ultimately the goal. So if we go to significant issues, I think that I just want to respectfully underscore that, without the enhancements, my best advice to you is that timely, accurate, and efficient services to the public may be compromised. Keeping pace with complex investigations, cases in a timely manner with appropriate responses will be compromised, and there is a risk of decreased compliance with the disclosure requirements in the bylaw. And that starts to have a negative effect in that when you don't have the compliance you need, you get this spin-off effect of more complaints, more breaches, more investigations, and we have a small office. What we want to do is continue to focus our energies on proactive solutions, like providing the outreach and helping people comply. So I think we can move on to the next page, which outlines the capital asks. So, oh, actually, one more page, a few more pages on the, there we go. Sorry, we're still on the operating budget. So the request is almost $1.5 million, and in terms of where the funding is coming from, it's 100% from the tax dollars. The ask that I'm making in terms of the operating budget, and this remember is pertaining to the 2 staff persons and the sum of money to assist with investigations. It's almost 24% increase from the previous year. In terms of
what the base expenditure changes are, the biggest things are COLA and progression pay. Yes, and so I think I've already gone over the enhancements, so I think we can go over to the capital budget asks now. So these capital budget asks are part of what we need for modernization and for upkeep. So with an online registry, we're totally technology dependent in terms of being able to deliver on the disclosure part of our mandate. So in the green, you'll see that we have the State of Good Repair project, which represents the capital ask for long-term sustainability of the lobbyist registry itself. So Council approved a State of Good Repair project in 2015 and 2016, and it was completed in 2017, although it's not available to the public as of yet, where they're 96% there. There's some AODA requirements that have to be fulfilled before it's released publicly. But what happens with our office is there is a perpetual upgrade to that happens every 5 to 7 years. So that's what the green slice is for. The gray slice is the new ask that we've put in place for this year, which is a legislated requirement. Our existing case management system for the investigations unit has been decommissioned. And what this is for a replacement to that. And we're hoping to leverage off of the system that was purchased by the Ombudsman's office last year. So both of these are technology tools that are important for us in terms of being able to be efficient and to be able to move forward in delivering the transparency required. If we look at the year-over-year spread of that, the blue is what you see in 2019 is for the case management system for the investigations unit, and the 3 bars in the red in 2024, 2025, and 2026 represent the reiteration in the next cycle for the upgrade to the lobbyist registry. And the rest are just appendices, so thank you very much. If you have any questions through the chair, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions? Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, so the position that's to do with education and outreach, formerly we haven't really actually had any dedicated position for education and outreach.
That's correct, Councillor. Thank you.
So I'm going to assume that adding that one person can't present a whole plan. Is there a plan and they complement it, or are we hiring them and then they will develop a plan?
So let me correct. Let me just correct for the record. So we have 3 lobbyist registry advisors, and the position I'm asking for is a 4th lobbyist registry advisor.
Yes, I saw
so that. That is what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for an outreach position per se.
So you're only asking for 1 new position,
yes,
not the 2 originally contemplated?
The second one is a junior counsel position for the investigative unit.
Okay, now I really am confused. I'm sorry to hold people up, but I got to go back because that's not what I'm looking at in the notes. Sorry, I was jumping ahead, so I now have to get back to it. Oh, okay, there we go. My screen just froze up. Maybe you can get there ahead of me.
Okay, so
can you explain the discrepancy between what you just said and what it says in the notes? Like if we can acknowledge it by looking at the notes, because any non-member of Budget Committee is going to look at that.
Okay, so this might be the source of the confusion.
Yes.
We did a repositioning and repurposing of the 3 registry advisor positions, and we changed their job descriptions to include the job duties of stakeholder outreach. So the actual job title for the 3 advisors is now Lobbyist Registry and Stakeholder Outreach Advisor. The reason we did that is because being short-staffed, we added more things to their plate. We actually formally added the education and outreach activities to their jobs description.
Okay, so this position is an education and outreach position. So that'll go back to my original question then.
Yes.
Is there an education and outreach plan, or is this position, once they come on board, going to devise one?
There is an existing plan as far as best as our office can plan, in that there is a robust engagement that we do with respect to social media, interpretation bulletins, newsletters, training sessions, work with other government, and ongoing training with public office holders. It's a bit challenging to have a work plan in my office for this reason. We can't predict the number of complaints, and therefore we can't predict the types of investigations. And we like to tie together the teaching that we do with the outcome of an investigation. But it's not really like following a recipe where you say, well, I know that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and an investigation will be ready here. So it's hard to actually tactically plan it.
Right. But that this person would do nothing but that? So
No,
that the others would be able to do investigations?
The person that would be doing the lobbyist registry and stakeholder outreach would be doing what their 3 peers are doing, which is service the registry and also perform education and outreach activities.
So we're adding an extra position, but the education and outreach piece continues to be a side of the desk function, but over more people.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Office of the Ombudsman.
Can you help Emma pull the presentation? Can you just find it for me? Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Budget Committee. I'm pleased to present a brief overview of my office's 2019 budget this morning, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to do so. Like my colleagues before me, I'd like to just make a special thank you to Grace Young, who is a manager of financial planning and reporting in the City Clerk's office. Grace works with us all year long to help us with our budget planning and reporting, and we're very grateful for it. In terms of what Ombudsman Toronto does, we are, as you know, mandated by the City of Toronto Act. The city is required to have an ombudsman, and we are an independent and effective voice for fairness in the City of Toronto. Specifically, we listen to the public's concerns about city services and administration. We investigate by asking questions, gathering information, and analyzing the evidence that we obtain. We explore ways to resolve individual cases without taking sides, and we shine a light on problems, and importantly, we recommend system improvements. In addition to this reactive or investigative work, we also proactively consult with city staff, and we inform and show them what the requirements of administrative fairness are. We have really 3 lines of business. The first is the complaints resolution and the investigative work. The second is the proactive consultation with city staff to help them serve the public better. And the third is outreach, both to the public and also to city staff. We had a very productive year in 2018. We handled 2,111 cases using more efficient processes, which I'll outline in a moment. That was a 28% increase in complaints from 2017. 92% of the cases we handled in 2018 were closed that year, and 60% were closed within 30 days. We published 7 reports with 56 formal recommendations, and consulted with city staff on 12 different projects to enhance the fairness of the systems or processes that were being designed.
We also held about 100 stakeholder outreach sessions of various kinds, including presentations, meetings, etc. In terms of our public reports, the most notable ones that I'd like to mention are just to remind you that a year ago now, we issued an inquiry report on the winter respite services for people experiencing homelessness in the city. And our report directly led to major improvements in the communication and coordination of those very important services for some of the most vulnerable people in our city. It also led to new service standards for respite sites, which did not previously exist. Also, our investigation on Toronto Community Housing's priority transfer process for tenants led to some major changes. Both TCHC and the city made changes in priorities in order to better serve tenants whose units are putting their health and/or their safety at risk. As I mentioned, the volume of complaints has increased significantly, 27% over the past year, and we have not had any increase in funding for staff. The complexity of complaints has also increased. I think, you know, we all know that the complexity of this city's government has increased, and so understanding where problems have arisen, and what systems might need to be examined to address those has become increasingly difficult, and it takes longer. At the same time, we have not, as I mentioned, received any additional staff, and so we have not as much time as I certainly think we should for proactive ombudsmanship. And that is the proactive work of helping city staff to design systems and processes to serve people fairly. Our priority actions for 2019 are to continue to fulfill our mandate to improve fairness in how the city treats people. And there are three aspects to that. We want to continue to listen to and resolve complaints as effectively and quickly as possible to ensure public trust in the City of Toronto. We want to continue to consult with city staff to help build equitable and fair systems and services. And we want to continue expanding our outreach, both to the public and to city staff, as well as council, of course, to inform them about our role and services, and also to inform them what administrative fairness is and what it requires. We undertook some significant business modernization and transformation in 2018, and I can confidently tell you that we are using every dollar that City Council allocates to us in the best and most effective and efficient way that we can. The first thing is the Ombudsman Toronto inquiry. It's a new, informal, flexible, and nimble tool that we are using to consider an issue, gather information, and resolve the problem as quickly as we can. Sometimes it takes a very short time, sometimes it takes longer. Usually these are concluded with a call or a letter to the complainant and to the city division or department, simply informing them that we've concluded our work and that we're going to close our file. When it's in the public interest, we will publish a report. Most of our inquiry reports, unlike the investigation reports, most of them go directly to our website so that we don't take up council's time presenting reports to council, unless, of course, one of the councillors or the mayor requests it, in which case we're very happy to do that. The Ombudsman Toronto inquiry, I should tell you, has been a topic of much interest in the broader ombudsman community as a modern innovation to getting more out of the money that goes into ombudsman work. And I've actually been invited to give a keynote at a national ombudsman conference this spring to explain what it is and how it works and how we found it to be effective in stretching our resources. The second major innovation or transformation that we underwent in 2018, you heard about it from my colleague, the lobbyist registrar, was that we purchased and implemented a new case management system. And this is specifically designed for ombudsman offices. It came from Australia after a very exhaustive and comprehensive procurement process. And it has improved our capacity to record our work and to analyze our casework, to find trends, to see where fairness problems are arising, and figure out proactive ways of addressing them. It makes us better able to capture the complexities of our work and to strategically and efficiently deploy our resources. I think I mentioned these performance measures already. In order to be effective, we have to handle every case as quickly as we can and give it the resources that it needs, but no more, frankly. The good news is that in 2018, we did close 92% of the cases that we opened in the year, that we handled that year. But more and more of our inquiries are taking longer. 40% of our inquiries in 2018 took more than 30 days to close. And that's because of the increasing volume and the increasing complexity that I spoke of a moment ago. We have a very small staff complement. We have 2 complaints analysts, which are the people who do the intake of complaints, and we have only 5 investigators. And frankly, all 7 of those people are finding themselves very bogged down with the number of complaints and issues that they're being asked to address every day. Next one. So in terms of our significant issues, really, as you can see on this graph, the number of cases has been steadily increasing, and our budget has not. Next slide. Similarly, the number of cases, again, has been increasing, and our staff complement has been level. And so the strain on our ability to be effective and to be efficient and to deal with members of the public's complaints quickly and effectively has been compromised. So I'll just quickly review the dollars. My recommendation for 2019 is really a very simple one. I'm recommending that Council approve my base budget plus a very modest increase of $167,000, which will fund 2 very much needed staff positions. I'll explain what those are in just a moment. In terms of our base budget, the key cost drivers are simple. It totals just about $60,000. Almost all of it is for staff, and the $11,000 remaining is for computer software and hardware that are required to sustain our case management system. In terms of the new and enhanced services request, the recommendation is to fund 2 new positions. One for a complaints analyst, which are the staff who conduct the intake for complaints and who handle the simple and quickest cases on behalf of the office. And that's in addition to the only two that we have currently. The second new staff person that I'm recommending is an additional investigator over and above the 5 that we have to handle the more complex cases. Our enhancement request represents 0.0014% of the 2019 staff recommended gross expenditure levy budget of $11.636 billion. What we are asking for is, in many senses, a drop in the bucket, I would say, in terms of the big decisions and the big numbers that you are dealing with, but it will make a very real difference to the effectiveness of the Ombudsman's office. This is not about growing my office or expanding our services. This is about keeping up with service pressures and giving the public and the city the service that it deserves. I would just want to take this opportunity to thank and commend my very small team, express my appreciation for their dedication and the excellent work that they do to serve the public and the city as part of our office. The capital situation is very simple. As mentioned, we do have a new case management system, but in 24 and 25, we will need to expend some capital funds to keep it in good repair. The appendices are all there, and they explain the details of our recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Questions? No, I think it's pretty clear and succinct, so I appreciate
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so next we're gonna get about a half hour before lunch, so we'll just start working down. We'll begin with the corporate services. I don't think there was any questions for 311 as I recall. Oh, sorry. I was trying to get out of that one there, Councillor, but. Okay, so we're going to begin with 311. So Councillor Perks, all yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, looking at the analyst notes, I see, oh, where am I now? I see that, so on page 3, looking at the percentage of calls that are answered within the specified 75 seconds, that, you know, you had a bit of a downturn last year. You were off 5% from target. Can you explain to me what the plan, but you're showing that you're back to target next year. Can you explain to me how you're making up that 5% difference?
Through the chair, absolutely. What basically happened was we had to deal with a series of absenteeisms that happened within our organization. So what we did was we established a roundtable with the appropriate stakeholders such as HR, LR, and so forth to look at these predominant cases that people were abusing the system in some way, shape, or form. We were able to rectify certain behaviors and address certain behaviors in a more extreme manner if we had to. And if you looked at the numbers actually started to increase back to 80% towards Q4, and currently in Q1, up to the storm, we're at 82%.
Okay. I see also in the next section, just down the page, that the handling time went up, and you're attributing that to calls becoming more complex. Often there are multiple issues, and you know, the call time, oh geez, took a pretty big jump, but you're showing that it comes back down next year. What happened there?
In regards to some of those things, we had to deal, through the chair, apologize, we had to deal with sometimes deflating the resident or the client, which takes a bit more time.
You had to, deal with what?
Deflating the escalation. Or
the escalation,
yes.
Okay.
So in some cases, because of the complexity, you have to take a bit more time on the call. And instead of looking at it from per transaction, you want to have a humanistic approach in terms of addressing some of the residents' emotional concerns.
So that was the cause, but you're showing that the problem goes away. How are you planning to do that?
Because we've had people that were a little bit more trained in de-escalating the particular calls. We spend a lot of time and money on training our staff to address that, and we are continuing to do that in this year as well.
Okay. Looking at page 28, looking at the capital unmet needs not included in the 2019 to 2028 staff recommended capital budget, I see that it looks like you're deferring integration with Toronto Public Health?
Through the chair, yes, we are. We are basically at this point in time deferring two particular integrations, public health and also with Toronto buildings. And what we want to do basically is we want to test a new technology that actually made integrations much more effective, efficient, and much more cost-effective as well. We did a pilot in last year, which we demonstrated some new technologies and new process improvements that actually reinforced that.
Okay, but I don't see you, like you've done your pilot, you've learned some things, but I don't see anywhere in the 10-year plan where you would integrate Toronto buildings or Toronto Public Health.
It actually is on our roadmap. We'd have to improve that because we are dedicated to actually incorporate Toronto Public Health.
Can you show me where in your budget you show what year you're going to be integrating Toronto Public Health? Because it's listed here on page 28 as an unmet need, meaning there's no plan to integrate them.
There are conversations between our divisions because there was an initial ask to remove from 311. We then, with the new leadership that came on board, we started having proactive conversations about reintegrating back into 311, but there has not been a concrete commitment as of yet.
So just in plain English, the 10-year capital plan does not foresee implementing Toronto Public Health or Toronto buildings into 311.
In plain English, through the chair, we are looking to modify that to incorporate that going forward.
I'm not asking about what you're looking at. I'm asking in terms of the budget proposal that is in front of us. Am I reading it correctly that within 10 years we will not integrate Toronto Public Health and Toronto buildings?
And through the chair, we're looking to address that in 2020.
Maybe I can ask financial planning. I'm looking at page 28.
So through the chair, the unmet needs table on page 28 identifies Toronto Public Health as something that is not funded yet. The plan would be, as we get closer to when the timing is identified, that we would try to incorporate that, but it is currently not funded in the 10-year capital plan.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll?
Yes, so I'll go to capital first. Let me break capital down into two ways. First of all, in terms of just this year's capital, you are saying that there's not any real deferral here, just a downwards adjustment to acknowledge your ability to spend.
Correct.
What's affecting your ability to spend?
The ability to spend is we moved, through the chair, we moved our focus from 311 specifically to Toronto at your service and a larger enterprise approach. And in some cases, a good example is that with the CRM. And we're looking at the enterprise, the client relationship management solution, sorry. And we're looking at that from an enterprise lens versus a 311 lens, which changes the scope and complexities, which created a little bit more delay in the rollout of that particular initiative.
Okay, so that's affecting you this year, but it's also entirely unfunded. That's the bigger chunk here. That's 31 million of unfunded over the next 10 years to do that enterprise-wide CRM, which goes to our ability to move this to a cloud-based service, is it not?
So through the chair, what we are doing, Councillor, we're actually going to be coming back through 2020 with a full plan on the integrations across all the divisions citywide with the client relationship platform, and that will be the request. It's going to actually, there is a lag-in system that today that we use that we are actually moving into a different system that's cloud-based, to your point, that will be an enterprise solution, but we're coming in 2020. Once we actually have the business case completely done, we have not done that as of yet, and we're working with the appropriate divisions.
So, and therefore, is this another case where we have what we know is going to be something that has to be in the 10-year plan we're looking at now? Are all of these future amounts pulled out, therefore, of the 10-year plan?
The only one that I believe that we've pulled out was the one that Councillor Perks was speaking about. We're coming in with the full plan for 2020 across the organization.
But there are no placeholders in there, even though this is a known quantity and we've got to start in 2020 or we've got a problem.
Through the chair, there is a placeholder, and there are funds for 311. So there are funds above the line to initiate the CRM from a 311 perspective.
But these amounts that you will need, 2.2 and 20, another million in 21, 4 and 4 in the future. Well, 4 until 2028. There's no placeholder for those in the budget right now?
No, there's not.
So next, we have a number of capital needs across a number of divisions where we've cut things in half and we suddenly have to double them next year. We have a number of things with no placeholder, chief among them TCHC, and yours isn't in there either. So next year, when we do fold this into the plan, it's a big jump in next year's 10-year plan.
Potentially, we have to do our due diligence to validate that number. That was just a guesstimation at that point in time.
Okay, then if I could jump to the service level pages that are in the 30s, here they are. Tell me about business intelligence. This is something that everyone's supposed to be trained in. Remind me, because I remember getting a presentation about it, but I note in the service levels we're really not getting to everyone involved. Number of users trained in business intelligence reporting tool. The goal, for instance, this year was 48, only 10 were achieved.
Through the chair, the BI tool is actually open up to the councillors as well as the stakeholders that we actually service. And it entails about a 3-hour training session. We've met with new councillors as well that's come on board, and they're actually starting to get trained on that particular platform too.
Is there a way to rejig the program? Does that have to be a one-on-one thing? Could we meet the target by group training?
Absolutely.
But there's no proposal to do that?
At this point in time, now we're having this conversation, and if there's a demand for that, we can adjust our process accordingly.
Okay, and call answers. If we ask the average user out there on 311 and we tell them that 80% of these calls are answered in 75 seconds, when they're finished laughing, they tell me I'm making that up. So, can we break that down by time of day?
I could definitely send you that documentation and put that in the report. I don't have that with me, but yes.
Yeah, so we could do it in a reporting mechanism, we could do it at committee, but we don't set a service level such that we would really understand our ability to meet the service levels during waking hours.
So basically, the two major shifts within the contact center for the day is anywhere between, let's say, 7 o'clock in the morning to 9:30, and then around 4:30 in the afternoon to about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night.
Those are the real peaks.
Yes, and we make sure that they're absolutely staffed, 100% to peak to manage that particular load. And we actually extend hours and shifts accordingly, depending on the volumes and the nuances that occur that day. We definitely, for the last 4 years, have managed that service level well over 80%. And for the most part of last year, we did that less than 2 quarters that we managed some absenteeism that we've addressed. And one of the things that we've done to also make sure that we've addressed that is we've changed a staffing individual and brought a staffing person that's very focused on LR and HR, that's now part of our complement that are dealing with some of the negative behaviors.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go on to facilities, real estate, environment, and energy. Councillor Perks.
Okay. So starting with Transform TO. So I couldn't find a single number anywhere for what the plan or what the 2019 expenditures on Transform TO are. So I went through all the different projects that were in the short-term strategy, and I added them up, and I got to 5.441 million. Is that roughly what you know it to be?
That's right.
Okay.
Correct.
I have in front of me, because I never let a piece of paper go, the 2017 briefing note, which said that for 2019, those actions would be at 7.8 million. Is that also correct?
That's what it says in the briefing note.
Okay. So we are, by my math, 2.36 million behind the implementation plan that was approved in the 2017 budget.
Actually, I believe what you're looking at is a briefing note that was taken to council, but I think the budget for Transform TO was approved in March of 2018.
Okay, so we're behind what was provided in the briefing note.
Correct.
Okay, so that's one piece I wanted to establish. The second piece is my recollection was that a number of the actions that we foresaw on the Transform TO project were dependent on some revenues from the provincial carbon pricing. Is that, am I remembering right there?
I don't think that's quite true. I think when you look at the short-term strategies that we took to council last year,
not in terms of the short-term strategy, but the overall plan.
Right. So when you look at the cap and trade dollars, none of the strategies that we were going to implement were really dependent on them. The business cases were whole without those cap and trade dollars. There's no doubt that we saw a role for all 3 levels of government as we rolled out the plan, and we still do.
Okay. Well, I'll leave that for another day because I'm curious about it, but I've only got a few minutes.
Okay.
So the other thing that I recall is that in order to meet the greenhouse gas reduction targets that we had, there wasn't a lot of wiggle room in the plan, A, and B, as you told me over and over and over again, early action gets bigger results. So by not doing about 1/3 of what we had originally planned to do, how much does that put us off target? in terms of our reductions?
Well, we're actually doing fairly well. There was a press release went out today that identified the CO2 reduction based on 2016 data, and we're in pretty good shape in terms of that.
That's good to know, but I asked a very specific question, which is, in the original design of the program, you had projects coming on in certain years in order to create reductions. We've now just agreed that you're a third short in this year's budget in terms of the resources you were bringing on to deliver those projects. And I'm wondering, as a result of being a third short, how does that impact our ability to meet the targets going forward?
Yeah, there's no doubt that with less budget, we can accomplish our ability to produce the results is less. But in terms of where we are relative to what was...
I appreciate that. I've only got a minute left.
Okay.
So is there anywhere in the notes or any document that council has saying that given you're a third short in terms of the implementation here, that does or does not affect our ultimate ability to meet the targets that council approved?
You know what, Councillor, I would go to staffing levels. We were approved last year to hire 25 people, 6 the year before, and 10 this year, and I think we're basically on track there. We've been very successful working with other divisions, and we've been hugely successful working with the private sector in advancing the cause of Transform TO.
Jim, I don't doubt the importance of the work you've done. I don't doubt that you're bringing on great people and you have great partnerships, but that's not what I'm asking.
Well, Councillor, I think maybe it's best if we came back with a more fulsome answer.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, any other questions? Councillor McKelvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you just so it's clear, what was the amount requested in 2018 and what was the amount funded? Or Transform TO, still, same line.
Sorry, the amount that was requested in 2018 was fully funded by council, and it was just the total annualized budget was 4.3 million.
And what is the total amount being requested this year?
Through the chair, it's one.
Sorry? 1.1 million more this year or total this year?
1.1 million more.
More this year, okay. And what is the total number of staff going to come to this year?
Through the chair, we added 25 staff in 2018, and we're requesting a further 5 in 2019 and a further 5 in 2020.
And there's 4 programs total associated with Transform TO. Is the staffing within each of those programs, so if you distribute the staff between the programs, are all 4 tiers of the program also fully staffed with this request?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you relate to, or what's the relationship with the Resiliency Office and the Resiliency Report that's coming forward? How are those 2 strategies interfacing?
We've been working very closely with the Resiliency Office. The creation was really created through the efforts of the Environment and Energy Division. And we've been consulting with the CRO throughout the 2-year tenure of his term. And, you know, clearly resilience is related. I think mitigation, adaptation go together. And we've made sure that those conversations have been happening throughout the last 2 years.
And under what department is that Resiliency Office funded? That's not through facilities, that's its own?
So yes, the Chief Resiliency Officer reports to the City Manager, the CMO, but the funding has been provided by the Rockefeller Foundation.
Okay, okay. And for Transform TO, and I haven't seen this press release that came out today, I'm excited to hear that's there and I'll look for it. Is it breaking it down in terms of targets by carbon? So the total volume in 1 year, what your success rate has been in a reduction in carbon?
I think it's just I think that basically it's based on 2016 data.
Okay.
We're showing a 33% reduction below 1990 levels.
And are we able to then change that data into an amount of carbon per dollar spent and start to look at that trend?
Have we got that?
With specific to the programs that we're delivering as a city, we do that kind of tracking, but broadly, that 33% is community-wide, so that's going to incorporate emission reductions that occurred because of provincial action by the private sector. So it'd be a bit harder to do it for the overall, but for the programs that we deliver specifically, yes, we can do that.
And then are we able to compare that against international best practice and what others are doing to see if we're being very effective in our carbon reduction strategy?
Yes, we do that. We're members of 2 or 3 groups of cities, and we know when we compare ourselves to other cities around the globe that we're doing very well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Layton, did you have questions?
Yes, thank you. Let me just find the growth-related cost item on page 21. No, it's not on page 21. The performance measures lists growth-related projects as, this isn't specific to energy, but to facilities. It says that there's a growth-related line under the service performance that is low compared to some of the other, like the SOGR. I'm just wondering what those growth-related projects actually are.
Through the chair, generally growth-related projects will represent, say, new builds or new buildings we're doing, things like Union Station or St. Lawrence Market North. That would fall under growth-related. And some of those are in service improvements as well. So that makes up the bulk of those 2 categories.
So the number was extremely low in the percentage completed compared to the other categories. I'm just wondering what can explain that, and what are we doing to try to?
So the complexity of some of those projects, and some of those could be also property acquisitions. And in cases where the timing doesn't line up, where there's negotiated deals that haven't been secured by year end, then there wouldn't be any spending in those categories, and they would have a large impact or a significant impact on a consolidated spend rate for the program.
Okay. What's the, on page 25, what's the big jump from 2019 to 2020 in the state of good repair backlog? There's a significant jump.
Through the chair, over the past few years, we've enhanced our building condition assessment program to better assess properties than we have in previous years. We've added in building resiliency towards mechanical electrical systems, as well as adding in equipment changes to look at equipment that would address reducing GHGs by 2040 in existing buildings. So in previous years, the BCAs were more basic. We've actually enhanced them, and that's why there's a big jump from 19 to 20.
Is there a concern, because our completion rate on the SOGR was the 50 to 60? Is that a concern? It seems low, but.
So through the chair, looking at the entire portfolio, it's at 63%, but when you pull out actually 2 acquisitions and Union Station and St. Lawrence Market, it's about 73%, but the basic SOGR, to your question, Councillor Layton, for what Patrick was talking about, was actually, it's about 85%. So this group has actually have gone from 53 to 55 in 2016, 2015, up to about 85% now from a completion. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Beyond the St. Lawrence Market piece on the user fee rates, are there any other that are going up above inflation?
Through the chair, no, those are the only ones that are going up above inflation.
So on some of the, and this is purely out of curiosity, so there's 2 of the service impact adjustments, or at least one that's not TO Transform TO related involve us bringing the service in-house. For instance, the security at City Hall. That's now, what, entirely in-house?
Through the chair, yes, it's all in-house.
The benefit of that was?
Sorry, through chair, I don't quite understand the question.
Why did we choose to go in-house?
Higher skilled security employees is the main reason.
Better security as a result of bringing it in-house. There was also another place where I believe that, and you know what, I'll find it and I'll make a statement on it at council. Not always cheaper and better to go outside of the corporation.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Bradford, that'll be actually, Councillor Bradford will be the last questions before lunch. Staff, it looks like there are quite continued questions after lunch, yes.
Just a couple of questions for real estate. Through the chair, I understand that you guys are considering some asset sales. Can you elaborate on how you identify these buildings and what the list of potential sales looks like?
Through the chair, can you be a little bit more specific on which types of asset sales you're referring to?
I'm basically trying to determine how we are identifying buildings in our portfolio that we would like to potentially sell, and how we ensure that we still have adequate space for city employees.
Through the chair, those types of asset classes are now being managed through Real Estate Services and Create TO on looking out, bringing in the greater initiatives the city has as a whole. Examples are Housing Now, shelters, and et cetera. The other types of dispositions that we do are smaller nature, like laneways, sliver of lands that participate within a development that have great value, but have no municipal purpose to them.
Okay, so more easements. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
And then a question for fleet services. I see that we're looking to one of our new.
Not actually on fleet services yet.
Okay.
That'll be the next.
After lunch?
After lunch.
Okay. That's it then. Thank you.
Okay. Whether Councillor, was it just Councillor Perks? Was it just you that had a few more questions? On the real estate side. Yes. So what if it's okay? Why don't we just get that done so they don't have to come back after? Okay.
So turning to page 25, chart 3. I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. Currently, the accumulated backlog for facilities is $328 million, and that's about 8.5% of the asset value. And at the end of the 10-year program, it will be $636 million, or 15% of the program. Am I reading that right?
That's correct.
That's correct. So what kind, like, for facilities, I mean, being 15% behind on assets, being in a state of good repair, what does that manifest as?
So in terms of being able to address the backlog, first and foremost, over the past 2 years, we've been able to increase our spend rate to 85%. So now what we're doing is looking at how we can actually look at a 3-year horizon, look at different asset classes where we can create more of a program approach to delivery, which allows us to then allow contractors to then purchase in bulk and provide savings through the tenders. Because what we do is when we're looking at the amount of funding that's provided, we go through and do as many projects on an annualized basis. And then as excess funds come up, we try to deal with the backlog in that fashion.
And I'm pleased to hear that. Has that new work been taken into account in your capital planning, that new approach?
We've just started rolling that out in the past year, Councillor. So our goal is moving forward is to strategize looking always at a 3-year horizon.
Right.
And look where we can create bundles of projects. We also want to, sit down with PMMD as well, look at supply chain strategies as well. So for example, if we knew looking 3 to 5 years out, we needed to buy, say, 100 HVAC systems or HVAC units, we would sit down with PMMD and do a corporate call to see if we can get preferred pricing. So those price savings are actually reflected in the tenders, so we can actually account for those savings.
And that's helpful.
Council, we just have to extend very quickly just to do this, finish this question.
Maybe 3 more minutes.
Moved, all in favor.
Okay. So that's all helpful to know. I'm trying to understand a different thing, though. So the kinds of things I'm seeing every single year in the capital plan, the backlog increases. So that's just to give me a sense, what worries you most? Is it that we're falling behind on mechanical electrical? Is it that we're falling behind on re-roofing? Is that we're falling behind on structural building envelope? Given that every single year the backlog is increasing, what are the consequences for the management of the facilities that fall under your division?
I mean, of course, it's a challenge, and we're trying our best to deal with the state of good repair as best we can with the amount of fundings provided.
It has to do with the amount of funding provided then. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Recess for an hour.